Welcome back. I'm Mudar Pratap Singh. You're joining us on NewsX. Our big focus this hour: India and the US have unveiled a framework for an interim trade agreement aimed at lowering tariffs, reducing trade frictions, and reviving momentum towards a full bilateral trade agreement. Under the pact, the US will cut duties on Indian goods to 18%, down from the effective 50% imposed last August over India's purchases of Russian oil. In return, India will reduce or remove tariffs on a range of US industrial and farm products and address long-standing non-tariff barriers in medical devices, ICT goods and agriculture. Joining us live to discuss this further, we have Mohandas Pai, Chairman of RN Capital. Welcome, Mr. Pai, to NewsX. Thanks for speaking with us today. Now that we have the joint statement, what are your immediate big takeaways from it?
Well, the takeaway is that India is a strong, confident country which will negotiate trade treaties with the most powerful nations on its own terms. India will not be browbeaten. India will not beg any other country for what it considers to be national interest. India will negotiate for its own national interest, and the world is recognizing that. The US has recognized that, and the EU has recognized that. Now we have a trade pact with the two of the largest economies in the world. And between them, they're about maybe 40% of the global economy. I think that's very good news. Second, we'll have full access to the US market on favorable terms because 18% is less than what they're charging other emerging markets, but higher than their allies. That's fine. And EU, we got a duty-free access, may happen in the next 6 to 8 months. So the trade deal is on. And our strengths being labor-intensive industries where we have suffered from other countries having lower duty, will now be much better than them or equal to them, and we can have the market, and we got huge capacity, and we can expand and create employment in the labor intensive area. And the third, India has demonstrated that it'll open up its market, which is good for us. Opening up a market to Europe and America means that we become very competitive, because even if they sell us whatever they want to sell, we have the strength to absorb, the strength to assimilate, and we will get new technology, because when the market expands here, instead of exporting, they will set up manufacturing here and export out of here. That's what happened. And then lastly, I think this is like the WTO moment that China had when China joined the WTO. When China joined the WTO, it was a great moment because that led to the rise of China. And China today is a $20 trillion giant. And I think we should use this opportunity to expand our business with US and show them we will import from you too. As for that $500 billion of imports, I think a very large part of it, maybe 80, 100, 120 will be import of airplanes, which you don't manufacture anyway, which we are contracted and which we will contract in future. I think that's important. We'll have airplanes with many of our airlines buying them. We'll have defense equipment to modernize our defense, and that will lead to some manufacturing here. And we'll buy more oil from the US and much more goods from the US. On agriculture, we have protected our farmers in areas where we wanted to protect. We are given entry to America for nuts from trees, for California almonds, and for certain, processed food and fruits, etc., which is normal, which is already there. We've only given them, expanded it, and I think that's very good news.
Yes, the Prime Minister has also told the House that this is a win-win deal for both countries. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. It's a win-win. We got what they want. They got most of what they want. We protected our vulnerable sections, and we got access to the markets. What more do you need?
Yes. Now, have India's red flags also, the red lines on agriculture, been respected? Because that has been a contentious area. What, in your assessment, has caused the US administration to agree to that?
No, I think India's red lines have been accepted, and it's already been accepted, because remember, we had a deal with them which was on Trump's table for a long period of time. I think what made Trump agree to this was the fact that we signed with the EU, and the EU will get an advantage to export to our markets compared to American companies, and everything was ready, and import of Russian oil has come down. And if import of Russian oil is come down, because import is the basis of new contracting. I just saw a report that even in January, the imports are quite high, but new contracting has come down after the new sanctions. So I think everything that Trump wanted He could say that I got it, and we could say we got what we wanted. So win-win for both countries.
Absolutely. Do you also think India has set a historic example when it comes to negotiating deals?
Yes, for the first time, I've seen a strong, confident India negotiating deals and not begging for deals. In the UP era, we are like beggars. We're going around the begging bowl, shutting off a market, scared to let competition come in. Now we are a confident nation with a large growing economy, and we're opening up our markets, and we're asking them to open up their market on fair terms. Both of us have some red lines, which you have done, which is very good. For example, Trump has some tariff on steel. These are the red line for him. And we have tariff on, we are not allowing agriculture, commodity export, barring some items, which are not very large, which we need anyway. So I think it shows a very strong, confident India, which is willing to open up. Earlier, we never were willing to open up our markets. So others used to feel, why should we negotiate with India? They're not getting any advantage. We are now opening up. We gave the UK a quota of high-end cars, which they wanted. We gave the UK a quota for whiskey, which I think we're the largest consumer of in the world today. We are given EU, they want to export, wine. We are given them that. And, these are all things that we can give.
Yes, also, is there going to be, Mr. Pai, any immediate impact of this deal? If not, how long do you estimate for the real impact to be seen by us?
The immediate impact, because the 25% tariff for the Russian oil is gone away immediately. And I think from 6th or 7th February, the tariff rate for the others has come down to 18%. I think read the fine print.
And where do the biggest opportunities lie after the India-US deal or the EU deal? What would your advice to young entrepreneurs be? How do they reap the benefits of these key agreements? They've been called, of course, by some as the mother and the father of all deals.
Biggest benefit for us will be traditional export of marine products, of garments, of textiles, of handicrafts, and other areas where we are hit by the tariffs. Second, for auto components and autos, where we have got a strong advantage, we got huge capacity. That will be the big advantage. And the third big advantage will be in the export of electronics and other areas where the threat of any tariffs is now gone away. Because we can now manufacture much more and export. We are already exporting a lot for Apple. And I think the value added in Apple now is 20%. Will go to 40% in the next 2 years, which is very, very good for us. So I think all the areas where we have strengths, we are exporting. And this will help us in services too, because the American companies will feel that there's no punitive tariff on India now, on the US side. Some of them are becoming cautious what Trump could do. Now there'll be stability in the relationship, both for export, imports, and for...
All right, Mohandas Pai, I appreciate you joining us on NewsX with your perspective on this big story. We're also being joined now at this point by Ambassador Kanwal Sibal, former Foreign Secretary of India. Ambassador Sibal, thank you for speaking with NewsX on this big day when finally, of course, the fine print has emerged of the US-India trade deal. What are your main takeaways from it, from what you've seen in this joint statement?
Well, I think we have crossed a very big hurdle in our relationship. The ties were going downhill. The atmosphere was becoming negative. The trust that was built over the last couple of decades or less in our ties was getting eroded. And general anti-US sentiment was growing. But more than that, I think there was a feeling that on account of the uncertainty that had been created, investment flows had got reduced, and companies were watching what will happen on the tariff front to take certain decisions on investment and other things. So that has been arrested, which is a very good thing. It's a positive thing. So now we'll have to see how this plays out. There are a couple of concerns. One is that Trump is unpredictable, and his agreements with the EU or with Japan or with South Korea have run into trouble. He has reimposed tariffs on South Korea because the South Korean parliament delayed the ratification of the agreement. So if everything goes smoothly, I think we are on a good wicket.
Right.
But if something happens and Trump himself or people around him feel that India has not lived up to its commitments, or some other issue arises which is unrelated to this, then Trump can take a decision which may actually reverse some of the gains that we have made. The second is on the issue of Russian oil. To my mind, this has absolutely nothing to do with trade between India and United States. This is trade between India and Russia. So if you're going to have a trade deal with the US, how does this issue come into the equation? Now, this is plain bullying and arm twisting by Trump. But, one can make the argument that since Trump had put his foot into it and imposed punitive tariffs of extra 25% because we were purchasing oil, and given the kind of man he is and his ego, it is very difficult for him to step back. And therefore, he had to show that what he did was not only justified, but produced results, and India has agreed not to buy Russian oil. So this will play well with not only the domestic audience, but create the impression that his strategy is successful. However, what is galling in this is that he's saying that we'll monitor to see if India lives by its commitment not to buy any Russian oil directly or indirectly, and the punitive tariffs can be restored and some other actions can be taken. Now, when you have a partnership, when you have a strategic partnership, when you are thinking of the long-term relationship, then you have to treat the other partner as equal. You have to respect the other partner and not use overtly bullying tactics. And then there's going to be some repercussions on our relations with Russia, because if actually what happens on the ground is in accordance with what Trump is saying, then we'll have to do a little explaining to Russia why we are buckling after having withstood pressures from United States all the months. But then, see, the other point which is not being addressed is that there will be 18% tariffs on Indian goods earlier, especially the labor-intensive goods. Earlier, the tariffs were about 2 to 3%. Now, which means that in a sense, the status quo ante has been reduced because the tariffs on us are slightly lower than what they are on Bangladesh or Pakistan or Indonesia or Vietnam, which means that we are back to where we were before. Now, automatically, why should this lead to a massive increase in exports to the United States?
True.
Because there's no tariff advantage that we have got.
True.
But what it can mean is that if we can up our game and make ourselves more efficient, produce more, become more competitive, introduce the necessary reforms.
I want to quickly get you in on the agriculture issue. No, point taken. Point taken, Ambassador Sibal. I want you to just quickly come in on the agriculture issue, though, because that seems to have been a red line that has been respected by the US administration. Do you believe that was important from our negotiating side, and that's something ultimately the US has respected?
Absolutely. I think on that, we have stood our ground, and all kudos to the government that they had taken a position that they will not yield on our red lines. And it's quite clear that we have not yielded on our fundamental red lines. Now, as it is, we were importing about $2.1 billion of agriculture goods. It's not as if from the US. It's not as if it was a no-no. And now if there is a little tweaking and we can import a few things here which actually we don't produce and doesn't affect our dairy and agriculture sector or marine product sector, then I think there has to be a little give and take. So if we have yielded marginally on these, I see absolutely no problem. So I think on this fundamental issue, the government needs to be congratulated. It has shown a lot of grit and determination, and it has come out successful. And the US has had to accept this. Now, we stood our ground with the EU also on agriculture products. We stood our ground with Australia. We stood our ground with New Zealand. So there is clearly on the part of government an acceptance that this very sensitive political issue has to be safeguarded, and we should not make any concessions which can hurt our dairy and agriculture sector.
Yes. Also, now finally that this deal is signed and is finally ready, and the fissures on trade are done and dusted. Are you hopeful that the other aspects of the partnership also now will be strengthened, Ambassador Sibal? The security cooperation, the defense cooperation. Already, of course, there have been those talks on rare earth minerals on the foreign minister's visit to the US. Do you hope that the other aspects which form an intrinsic part of the India-US partnership now finally will also be concentrated upon by the Trump administration, of course, and by us?
No, I think we should look at these things a little more maturely. Trump has not gone away. His erratic behavior has not gone away. America's policies of coercion have not gone away. There are a lot of pitfalls ahead in terms of how Trump deals with situations, including in our region. If there is conflict with Iran, it is going to have major impact on us. If, as Iran threatens, it will become a regional war. We have 9 million people in this region. So there are, and then of course he's going to visit China. God knows what he's going to agree with China. For example, on the Russian oil issue, he's completely silent on China's purchases of oil and gas from Russia, which are far more than what we have been getting from Russia.
But and will still continue.
Will still continue. So there are a lot of uncertainties ahead. I mean, you can't bank on Trump to be consistent. But having said that, we should keep our fingers crossed and see if we can build on the breakthrough that we have achieved. And when the whole thing is legalized, then some other things will become clearer. Now, of course, if tomorrow, or let's say in the near future, there is some kind of a peace agreement on Ukraine, then some of the issues I mentioned with regard to Russian oil and everything else, they will become less problematic.
True.
So let's keep our fingers crossed and hope for the best.
Yes, we'll also have to look at how the Venezuelan oil purchasing pans out as well. That's also something.
That is all right in the sense that we were buying $20 billion worth of oil from Venezuela until the sanctions were imposed. And Ambani and Reliance has been importing this Venezuelan oil.
Yes.
So if the Venezuelan oil comes back on the market, we can buy it. We can buy it, provided, of course, that it is cost effective. But we should do it because the Venezuelan government has reached some kind of a compromise with the United States. And if, with their consent, forced or otherwise, Venezuelan oil comes on the market, it's a market decision, it can be taken.
Ambassador Kapil Sibal, thank you very much for joining us with your perspective on that big story. We also have another special guest joining us now. Anang Mittal, former director of the Communications Office to Senator Mitch McConnell, is live with us. Thank you for speaking with us, Mr. Mittal. What are your biggest takeaways from this trade deal that has been officially announced now?
Yeah, look, just in the larger context, in a matter of 1 week, India has signed 2 historic trade deals, one with the EU and another with the United States. And so it's very clear from an Indian perspective that India is now positioned at the center of the global economy that doesn't include China. And it's very obvious that both the EU and the United States now view India as an emerging partner. And I know that a lot of people say, future ally and those kind of things, but it's very clear that India is charting its course, even in a much more major way than it has before on the global stage. And that's the real context of things in terms of, whether you want to talk about, the trillions of dollars. I mean, probably upwards of $40 trillion in terms of economic exchange that's going to happen over the next decade, if not 20 years. Overall, I think it's a very clear and visible sign that India is going to be a major player in the global economy and on the global stage for the years to come.
Also, how have the prices of Indian products increased in US markets after the tariffs? And, now when could we see them go back down?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's going to be the framework has been announced. And so it's clear that things are moving very smoothly and are moving very fast after what has obviously been months and months of negotiation. I don't know if I have a specific timeline to give you because those are always dependent on when things are fully formalized. But like I said, the framework is out, and both parties have released their own statements, praising the other side and the agreement. So it's very obvious that things are going to start moving very soon. This week, President Trump also announced Trump RX, which is a way of showing that he's reducing prescription prices. And I think that's, again, something where India's prescription market, the generic pharmacies and things that India exports are going to be very important, because I think that's the context that it should be seen in, that President Trump sees Indian markets, Indian manufacturers as helping his own economic goals domestically and internationally.
Do you think Indian products are also at a competitive, do you think they have a competitive edge in the US market?
Well, they already are. Look at the pharmaceutical industry. It's a huge trade. It's a huge investment that India has made, and so I think the pain that was being felt with the tariffs was being felt in places like that more than other places. And so I think that's a great example of even things like automotive parts, right? So this is how economies that are you can say emerging or middle economies operate, right? They start with spare parts. They start with things like pharmaceuticals, supplies, those kind of things, even weapons, right? So that's really where India's exports are going to be make an impact in the United States. And then obviously there's going to be agricultural exchanges as well. But I think on that side, the U.S. has more to give than India.
Do you believe now, looking at the fine print at the joint statement, that this has been a win-win agreement, Anang Mittal, for both sides, for both India and the U.S.?
Yeah, I think so. Look, the United States clearly needs to, improve its economy, its trade inefficiencies, and that's kind of why President Trump was elected. And I think some of what he's been talking about for the last, pretty much for the last 10 years has been that, he feels the United States has been getting a raw deal from some of these countries, but that doesn't necessarily mean that India was the guilty party. He was merely using the language of tariffs and overall trade to talk about improving America's standing on the economic stage. So I think from the American perspective, it's a win-win because, as I said, the American consumer, the American healthcare industry gets access to things like generic pharmaceuticals, reducing prices for everybody. And then on the Indian side, it's a win-win because Indian products also get access to American markets. And the Indian consumer, the middle class. Look, I grew up in India until I was about 12 years old. I know what it's like to have a ration card and have to go get simple things and have to fight for simple things. And so I think the Indian middle class, that is a huge middle class, that is a huge demand for products from America. For example, dry fruits and things like that. Just basic sort of agricultural products that America sends to India is a huge trade. I think those things are going to improve for the Indian consumer. Prices are going to go down for the Indian consumer. So I think it is a win-win. And then even on things like energy, I know that the Russian oil thing has been very controversial, but it's obvious that the United States is going to facilitate energy prices and energy supplies for India in a way that it hasn't before, especially with things like getting oil from the Caribbean, oil from Venezuela, places like that.
Also, how is the negotiation process? How do you believe the negotiation process has gone as well? India has not been confrontational with Trump during this process at all. We didn't slap reciprocal tariffs. There were no untoward statements despite the additional punitive tariffs as well. How has this approach been perceived in the U.S. where you are?
Yeah, I would say that. You can see how the negotiations with the confrontations and the general tenor of President Trump's deals and negotiations with the Europeans have gone. They have been much more confrontational. They have been much more civilizational, if you want to talk about it in those ways, where the Europeans feel that they are being attacked for no reason. And I think it's been very, very interesting to see how the American and Indian negotiations have gone, even in terms of just the perception of things, right? Prime Minister Modi went to China. He did photo ops with President Xi Jinping and with President Putin. And that was a clear message to the United States that India has options. But India never spent the time to denigrate the United States or to denigrate President Trump. And they tried to maintain that relationship in the best possible way last year as they could. And I think that proved itself fruitful after, I would say, maybe 4, maybe 5 months of tensions. By September, President Trump was wishing Prime Minister Modi a happy birthday. He was saying good things about India overall. He was saying he wants, Indian engineers to come to America. So I think the soft power aspect of it was already playing its part. And it's actually interesting that the Europeans never really figured out how to play up that soft power aspect. But I do believe that the Indians in America, Indian American CEOs, all kinds of leaders inside politics also played up that soft power aspect more than other countries have been able to do with President Trump.
Appreciate you joining us, Anang Mittal on NewsX with your perspective on this big story. On that note, we're slipping into a very short break.